Look, these encampments have been going on at universities now internationally for weeks. It's good to see, finally, some strong words from Harvard.
Absolutely. I mean, you'll remember Harvard lost their president over their failure to properly recognise anti-Semitism, to say it depends on the context. They lost their Anti-Semitic Advisory Council. They are being sued by several students for their failure to take action. But now what we're seeing on American university campuses is university authorities, police, local authorities like the Mayor of New York, taking stronger action than any of our Vice-Chancellors are doing here to prevent these encampments from continuing, because the President of Harvard is right. These encampments are disrupting the right of students to learn, the right of academics to teach on campus, and that's what universities are there for. They're for teaching, for research and for learning. Now, I think, I'm a former university administrator. Our universities are one of the great, or should be, one of the great achievements of this country. And many families, the idea of having their child, particularly if they're the first in family to go to university, is a wonderful thing. So getting into university, having a university experience should be a time of celebration. But we've got a situation on our university campuses where now the participation of Jewish staff and Jewish students is being excluded, and Jewish staff and Jewish students are being harassed and intimidated. And what happened on Sydney University's campus on Friday, where you had loud drumming and you had people who had nothing to do with the university coming on campus, waving jihadi flags, disrupted the ability of all students to learn and teachers to teach. And I can't believe that we are seeing university vice-chancellors like Mark Scott, university chancellors, people like David Gonski and Angus Houston and Julie Bishop and others, just washing their hands of these things. There's no mention in the Chancellor's statement of Jews or anti-Semitism. It's as if they don't count. I think we're at a really low period in anti-Semitism in this country. I've never seen it like this, Sharri. It's why I've been calling for a judicial inquiry into anti-Semitism on our campuses.
Well, what would a judicial inquiry look like? What would it do? And what would it have the powers to do? Why do you think it would help?
I think a judicial inquiry is really important when there's a major cultural issue in organisations. We've seen judicial inquiries achieve cultural change in the banking sector. We've seen them achieve cultural change in relation to the way in which institutions respond to child sexual abuse. We've seen them doing similar things at the moment into veteran suicide. We've got to a point now where, even before the 7th of October, anti-Semitism was growing on our campuses and university authorities were failing to deal with it. What we're seeing now on campuses since the 7th of October has been an escalation in anti-Semitic activity. We're seeing intimidation and harassment, and what we're seeing is authorities saying, this is just the price that Jewish students have to pay on campus. If we were talking about LGBTI students, or we were talking about Aboriginal students, and people were calling for the annihilation of Aboriginal people or the annihilation of LGBTI people, I cannot believe that universities would be doing the same thing. But there is a blindness when it comes to anti-Semitism, and there is a lack of seriousness with which the authorities are taking this.
Yeah.
And we can't have a country where one group of people are harassed and intimidated on campuses and we say, this is fine. Because ultimately that affects the productivity of the country, it affects the opportunity for all Australians. One of the great things about this country, and one of the reasons I love it so much, is that we've been one of the few places on earth where there's never been any formal discrimination against Jewish people. But seeing what's happening on our campuses now, it makes me fear for this generation and the next generation. We have to put a stop to it now. That's why I think a judicial inquiry which looks at the incidents on campus, the failure of universities to take action, what policies, procedures and laws need to change to get them to take action is the right way forward to deal with these issues. We're not talking one university, we're talking the whole sector.
All of them. No, I agree with you. The way that racism against Jews is tolerated but wouldn't be, for anyone else, it has been so shocking to many Australians. And also the other point that every other group can say what is offensive to them, but somehow, when it comes to the Jewish people, other people can say, actually, that's not anti-Semitic, that's not anti-Semitic, and the power's taken away from Jews to say, no, that is offensive. I want to ask you about the United Nations vote on whether to recognise a Palestinian statehood. This is happening on Friday. We haven't heard a clear answer from the Foreign Minister, Penny Wong, just yet. There is pressure on her at the moment not to give recognition. Jewish groups say that this would be rewarding terrorism. What do you think?
Well, let me start with first principles. I support a two-state solution for Israel and Palestine.
I think most reasonable people
Most reasonable people do. But the condition of that is that the Palestinian leadership recognises Israel's right to exist. And there are far too many actors in the Palestinian world that do not recognise Israel's right to exist. And what recognising a Palestinian state at this point in time would do is basically to reward the terrorist attacks on the 7th of October. I think if you think back to the 6th of October, what Israel was doing was it was making peace with a whole range of its neighbours. The Abraham Accords with the UAE, it's had peace with Egypt and Jordan for decades now.
Yeah.
But what this would do, by the unilateral recognition of a Palestinian state today, would be to actually undermine that, would be to say that Australia voting for that would be to say, actually, we stand with terrorists. And all people need to do who want to achieve things at the United Nations is to ramp up your terror activity. That's a terrible thing. I hope the government does the right thing and stands with our democratic ally Israel and does not recognise a Palestinian state until the Palestinians recognise Israel's right to exist. But what we have seen from this government, even before the 7th of October, is complete backsliding when it comes to Israel. They changed Australia's support for Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. They continue to vote against Israel and not with our allies, not with our principal ally, the United States, at the United Nations. Penny Wong, when she visited Israel, refused to go to the kibbutzim in the south of Israel to see where the terror attacks had happened. She has a blind spot on these issues. So I'm not holding out hope. But she should do the right thing, which is to continue to say a two-state solution should be the goal, but not until such time as the Palestinians recognise the right of Israel to exist peacefully and securely in its own borders.
Yeah. Julian Leeser, very strong words. Thank you very much for coming on. And I hope your idea for a judicial inquiry gets traction.
Thanks, Sharri.